We are live, sir. Okay. So, dear students, welcome to our webinar on post-poll violence in West Bengal and the question of human rights. Today, we have with us, Advocate Sri Loknath Chatterjee. Loknath is a graduate of my alma mater, which is West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences. He's a very distinguished advocate in Kolkata High Court, and he often fights cases for the dispossessed, for human rights matter. And one of his other identities is he was one of the youngest candidates in the assembly election in the West Bengal this year. He stood for BJP in Baliganj. He was one of the leading advocates in the post-poll violence judgment, which is I tell you the name, it is Shushmita Shahadatta and others versus State of West Bengal and Union of India. So just to give you a very short background, the West Bengal elections this time was extremely contested, and there was a lot of tension. As you know, the whole election had to be held in 8 phases, which is unprecedented in the history of this country. But even after the election got over, even after it was all done, there was concerted series of attacks on political opponents. I'm not getting into the politics of it. We are just today discussing the human rights aspect of it. So Loknath and some other advocates took the initiative and brought this before the judiciary, and there was a lengthy discussion and which culminated in the judgment of the Kolkata High Court. So Loknath, welcome. The floor is all yours. If you please just introduce the matter to our students.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure addressing such a distinguished gathering, and I'm sure this what we will do is an interesting intersection of practical life, of law, of constitutional guarantees, and of course, polity in West Bengal and the larger country as a whole. So, as just to put the facts in perspective once, as rightly pointed out by your professor, it was a long-phased elections in Bengal. The elections got over on the 29th of April, and this was quite an interesting election. Some have called it the clash of civilizations in Bengal. The results were declared on the 2nd of May. 2nd of May, just to give you a brief background of the facts, 2nd of May, as soon as the results were being declared, by the afternoon, the trends had started getting a bit clear that BJP could not muster the amount of support which it had wanted to garner, or whatever, various reasons were there. So by the afternoon, even while people who were there in the counting centers as counting agents, every political party appoints its own counting agents in the counting halls, because that's how the electronic voting machines are opened in front of them. There's a protocol which is to be followed. These counting agents, you have to deposit your mobile phones, and also you're cut off from the rest of the world. By the late evening or in the evening, once they started leaving the counting halls, it became clear that they were attacked, their homes were attacked. They were in a really, really sad situation. What West Bengal witnessed in the next few days after the 2nd of May was perhaps unprecedented, was perhaps the largest round of state-sponsored violence in Bengal post-1946. Bengal has been going through several shocks. If those of us who've had a bit of idea about Bengal's history, 1905, if you go back, Bengal was really the hotbed of revolutionary activities against the British Raj. Bengal had a lot of, freedom fighters, revolutionaries. They were all around. It was a great atmosphere all across in Bengal. As soon as, the situation in 1905, it became clear to the Britishers, then you've had Bengal getting partitioned. After that, 1946 Bengal. 1946 Bengal was a tough time when Jinnah had called for Direct Action Day, August 1946, 16th of August 1946. Jinnah calling for Direct Action Day. Then you had Surawadi's government in Bengal. All police officers of the leading police officers of the police stations were of a particular community. And then you had blood being spilled on the streets of Bengal like crazy. Calcutta was affected very badly. So this is one instance of 1946 Bengal. Bengal, once again, 1971. You've had the East Pakistan slowly taking shape into Bangladesh, present day. Just prior to Bangladesh liberation, you've had millions of people being rendered homeless, lakhs of women getting raped, thousands killed. That was the situation of Bengal circa 1971. Then you've had the left rule in Bengal. I would have wanted to delve a bit more into the historical perspective, but again, we've got time constraints, so we'll not be able to really discuss the present situation. Bengal has had a long history of violence in that manner. You've had the Ananda Margis, a Hindu group, religious group, getting massacred. Accused were some communist leaders. You've had the Saibari massacre, where a mother was fed with blood-soaked rice of a son. You've had several other incidents across the state. You've had Marichapi incident. You've had a lot of them. Then Singu Nandigram. So this was the situation. 2021 was unique. You've had an election. In the elections, it was a democratic election. Elections were fought. Someone had won, someone had lost. And then the violence that Bengal saw was unprecedented and unique in many manners. Why? The violence that Bengal saw was perpetrated against the weak, the lower castes, the elderly, the women, the children. It was unprecedented all across. We'll get into a bit of it. 2nd of May, as soon as the results were coming in, you've had right here in Calcutta, Beleghata, Avijit Sarkar getting murdered. He was hounded out. Then what you've had, a spate of murders all across the state. Till date, over 50 murders have happened post-election for electoral reasons. They've been given various names and shapes. They've been told some are suicides, some are unnatural deaths. For political reasons, over 50 murders have happened. Innumerable rapes have happened. Heinous gang rapes have happened. Scheduled castes have been tortured. Scheduled tribes have been tortured. They've been relentlessly facing the flag. And across Bay, we've had times when there was more than a murder a day. So this was the situation. You've had initially the Ministry of Home Affairs sent a special team. Thereafter, another team came from the National Commission of Women. Then came an initial team from the National Human Rights Commission. And then one after the other, which we'll discuss. How the situation panned out. Initially, we've had women getting raped in front of their family members. Someone was raped in front of her grandson. Someone was raped in front of her son. And these murders and rapes are continuing till this day. We'll come to it. So therefore, these were offenses which were punishable under the Indian Penal Code of 1860. These were offenses, many of which are punishable under the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act of 1989. Then what began was a spate of people leaving the state. Large number of people left the state. They had taken shelter in neighboring Assam. In the districts of Dhubri and Kokrajhar, there were 4 camps which were set up. People had sought shelter in Bihar, Jharkhand, neighboring Orissa. And the violence which happened all across Bengal, it was the same as we saw in the southern districts of, say, Medinipur, the 24 Parganas, and in the northernmost parts of Kuch Bihar. The same pattern of violence went on happening one after the other. This was the situation. In central parts of Bengal, in Birbhum, Burdwan, this violence was perpetrated. People in hundreds, large mobs came and attacked the homes of opposition workers, opposition supporters. In parts of South 24 Parganas, there is a place known as Canning. Canning, there was a specific person who went on torturing people, and that became infamous as the Canning model. What is the Canning model? The Canning model is people not only being hounded out of their homes, but then their homes getting damaged using bulldozers, using earth-moving equipment of JCB. And there in the southern parts of Bengal, in the deltaic region, adjoining the Sundarbans, there are smaller islands where people stay in various islands. So from one island to the other, there aren't much public roads which have been constructed by the government. So there are these smaller wooden or bamboo bridges. So these wooden or bamboo bridges were even destroyed using earth-moving equipment, using large bulldozers. So people who were living as in nomadic life on these islands, they were not connected to the mainland. They did not have access to medical facilities, access to ration, access to any kind of help or assistance. And they were getting tortured. And then the interesting part is, people who are trained in law are aware of the Police Act. They're aware of the constitutional duties and rights and responsibilities. People went on, that's the usual reaction of a person. One goes and complains to the law enforcement agencies, the police. So the moment the people went and approached the police authorities, the police would not only refuse to take a complaint, they would inform the others, the attackers. So the attackers would attack them again another round for having had the gall to go and approach the police. So this was the situation. The police had taken a completely biased and prejudiced role. And when people really tried to complain, they were implicated in false criminal cases. Bengal is the hub of false criminal cases. Since ages, people are being accused of narcotics cases. Since ages, people have been put behind bars in Bengal for false women-related complaints, for false cheating complaints. Bengal is the hub of manufactured false complaints. If police people don't comply, they are transferred. So this is the kind of state torture. For us students of law, democracy rests on 3 primary pillars: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. It was the formation of the legislature. Legislature did not take any steps. The executive not only failed, but then they were perpetrators in the crimes. The judiciary initially did not respond. And then later on, the fourth pillar of democracy, the media, failed the greatest. It is the ultimate job of the media to report in an unbiased manner what has been going on. They enjoy certain rights, they enjoy certain privileges, they enjoy certain constitutional guarantees also. It is here that the fourth estate failed the greatest. Sometimes the reporters on the ground were sending these reports to their media houses, but then the media houses deliberately did not publish such reports. They were all gung-ho about the victory of some political party. Interestingly, Mamata Banerjee herself lost to Suvendu Adhikari, who's now the leader of the opposition. So Mamata is still chief minister on lease in the manner of a caretaker chief minister. So this is the situation which transpired all over Bengal. The media not only did not report, they failed. It was criminal failure. Not only did not report such incidents, the media also accused people of spreading false information. That was the greatest failure of the media. The information wasn't false, is vindicated later on, as we know, by the decision of the courts. So you've had the three official pillars, and the most important, perhaps the most important, the fourth pillar of democracy, failing in its initial responsibilities. So people in Bengal who were scared, all of us were being threatened. You had large hordes of people coming and abusing you. Whenever, in fact, even when we go out nowadays, they use this phrase, khela hobe, which means the game's on. In fact, on 16th of August, which is the direct action day when the blood had spilled on the streets of Calcutta in 1946, was celebrated as Khela Hobe Divas by Mamata Banerjee. And then you've had, which some people accuse, of communal attacks. Because many had taken this election to be election on the grounds or a vindication of Mamata's policies. So this is the situation which transpired. People running helter-skelter. Opposition people were being denied vaccines. They were being denied medical help and facilities. They were being denied rations. In fact, even they are. In this situation, you've had a PIL being filed before the Guwahati High Court in Assam, where they wanted to protect the rights of the people who had been evicted from Bengal, who had been living as IDPs or internally displaced persons, and they had taken shelter in Assam. There were a spate of PILs filed before the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Certain Article 32 writs were also filed. Some people had taken shelter in Delhi. And then you had a batch of 9 PILs or public interest litigations being filed before the Calcutta High Court. In this backdrop, the judicial journey started. Susmita Sahadatta was there along with 8 other matters. Then you've had a team known as the Call for Justice team, comprising retired former bureaucrats and senior police officials coming down to Bengal. And they went to the districts to do spot visits and hear the stories from the ground. And interestingly, when this violence continued in Bengal, you had the Bengal government announcing a lockdown from mid-May. So there was a complete restriction. There was a complete restriction even of information. People could not gather information. People could not gather or come out in political protests. Even the moment they were coming out, they were being arrested, picked up by the police. The police people in private would say, we can't do anything. There's a lot of political pressure. And they cowed and bowed down to all such pressure. So this was the situation which was happening all across. Then the Call for Justice team came. They came up with the report, which we'll discuss. There was this team of groups of intellectuals and academicians, group of women academicians and intellectuals who came together, who prepared a report, which was titled Khela Hobe in Bengal. And then it really studied how rape has been used as a tool, as a political tool in post-poll violence in Bengal. And rape has been used historically also. Even the ISIS used rape as a means of political subjugation and torture, as a means of politically humiliating your enemy, as a means of taking or humiliating the greatest, most important, prized, important asset of a community, their women folk. That's how you break the back of your opposition. You challenge them and you say, see how I violated your women. So this GIA report spoke of rape being used as a political violent tool, as a tool of political violence. And then the Call for Justice team gave its report, which contains several recommendations, which were really a stinging indication of the affairs going on in Bengal. Then you've had the National Commission for Scheduled Castes coming down to Bengal, led by their chairperson, Mr. Vijay Sapla, Mr. Arun Halda, the vice chairperson. The entire team had come down. They visited the place of Kakoli Khetropal in Nabogram, East Burdwan, the lady belonging to a scheduled caste community. The allegation is that she was raped, she was murdered, and her head had been dismembered. Then the police, they are generally given the status of a cabinet minister. So they are constitutional authorities, so they should be given all support by the state agencies. So when they went to the place, the police said there's no one at home. Why? Because after killing the lady, her son was embroiled in false criminal cases. Her husband had his hand broken. Her brother-in-law had his leg broken. They were admitted in hospitals. So moment they received the SC Commission received information, they went down to the hospital and spoke. Otherwise, they wouldn't have received any information. The SC Commission met the Khejuri rape victim, the rape victim of Medinipur. Initially, that rape victim was brought to the Apollo hospital. Suddenly, the SC Commission evinced an interest, saying that no, we would want to meet. She's from a scheduled caste community. She was just languishing somewhere in some emergency ward. Moment it came to the knowledge that SC Commission is coming, then she was shifted to a gynecological ward, and at least a semblance of dignity was given to her. The next day, SC Commission went to the South 24 Parganas in Diamond Harbour. The person who had complained to the SC Commission, that person was threatened in such manner, he had to run away to Delhi. He said that if he comes back, he'll be killed, and there's no one to protect. What security do the people have on the ground? No security of what it's state. In this situation, the SC Commission did a press conference. They portrayed a worrisome trend all over Bengal, and especially the torture upon the scheduled caste community in Bengal. After that, you had the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes coming to Bengal. Mr. Anant Naik, the member, was there. The regional director was there. They visited the place of Kishore Mandi in Jhargram, the way he was murdered, a person from the scheduled tribe community. No one was arrested. The police were clueless as to what's happening, least bothered. They visited the place of Somhasta in East Burdwan, a member of the scheduled tribe community who was killed. Again, no arrest made. They visited places in Midnapur town, in Kharagpur, places where the scheduled tribe community people weren't even allowed to ply their vehicles, weren't even allowed to eke out a living, weren't even allowed to go out on the streets. Their women were shamed. They were not given any amenity worth its name. Huge resources, God knows, were being squandered. In what manner? They visited Kakora in East Burdwan, a scheduled tribe village, where people had undergone innumerable incidents of torture. Their houses had been torched, damaged, thatched roofs were burned to the ground. Their cows, villages, milch cows, cattle had been hurt. The person who had complained to the authority, he was embroiled in false cases. The police were threatening to pick him up right after the commission left. So this was the situation all across. They went down to Hooghly. In the Hooghly district, when they went there in Dhaniakali, which is very famous for its saris, the chief minister keeps gifting Dhaniakali saris to people, but perpetrates immense torture upon the people of Dhaniakali. They sat down with the authorities. Earlier, Scheduled Caste Commission had also come down to the Burdwan Circuit House, where in the Burdwan Circuit House, a lot of complaints had been received from the people. Similarly, ST Commission also kept on receiving a lot of complaints. In this manner, the various commissions came down, the MHA team came down, a lot of bodies conducted, civil society organizations conducted reports. But what was the most worrisome was the role of the state and the media. That still shames us. The state government, upon being elected, is the government of its entire 10.5 crore population. It's not the government of just the people who had elected them. They were elected on the votes of around 2.8 crore people, whereas opposition BJP had received 2.28 crore votes. So even if you look at their 48% vote share, 52% of the population had voted against them. So they also owe that responsibility upon the rest of the populace to govern and to consider them while ruling Bengal. So this was the role of the state. And incidentally, the moment people were protesting against these incidents, they were being harassed. They were being implicated in false criminal cases. Even today, innumerable number of people have been implicated in false criminal cases. Opposition workers, people who don't agree with the government, people who protest against the government, people who demand jobs from the government, not doles. So all of these. And then, of course, Bengal's become a hotbed of jihadi activities. You had the Khagragar bomb blast in Burdwan, which was initially downplayed as some random incident, but then the investigation was later taken on by the National Investigating Agency. So Bengal became an interesting study of what rule of law can give you, what the absence of rule of law entails, what do constitutional guarantees mean. This was a time when the Constitution of India should have walked out of the books of law and onto the streets of Bengal. This was a time when the Constitution was really, really felt by the population of Bengal, when the guarantees of right to life, when the guarantees of democracy, equal participation, right to dissent, right to speak, these freedoms, these constitutional guarantees, which form the bedrock of the Indian Constitution, bedrock of the social contract the Indian people had with the government, these were lost. And then we saw how the torture reminiscent of the Middle Ages once again played out on the streets of Bengal. Once again, the people, young children saw their mothers getting raped in front of them. People saw their fathers getting killed in front of them. People saw their elderly getting harassed. A 70-year-old woman was raped. I mean, animals are better than this. So this is the situation. And then you've had condemnation from few. Why? Because the people who were being attacked were the opposition. They are Indian citizens. They enjoy the same rights under the Constitution of India. And Bengal's become an important study in what sans constitution situation can entail. Bengal's become an interesting study of how post 91 Kashmiri Pandits, people have become IDPs, internally displaced persons within their own state, within their own country. Thereafter, you had the Calcutta High Court A lot of lakhs of people were were rendered homeless. Many were staying at the party offices of the BJP and other shelter homes. Their homes had been damaged. They were not in a position to go back to their homes. The security situation was horrible. So the situation was such that people could really not return. In this situation, the Calcutta High Court initially asked the National Human Rights Commission to examine all those cases and complaints and take in complaints, because state government had taken a view that there are no incidents in Bengal, that Bengal is all, it's a very peaceful place. Some minor things that happened between the 2nd and 5th of May, when really the chief minister had taken oath on the 5th of May. So therefore, it's not really her responsibility, although that's a really bad and lame argument to take, because the law and order always remains a state responsibility for whatever length of time, irrespective of whether you are the caretaker chief minister or the chief minister. That remains your responsibility. And then you also have some promises to your citizens. So the state government had taken this view. Now the NHRC, National Human Rights Commission, because it had the resources, it had the wherewithal to undertake that exercise, was asked. The NHRC came up with an interim report. When the courts were really surprised. In that point, the Calcutta High Court had constituted a constitutional bench comprising 5 judges to examine all these issues and to decide on the points of law. The 5-judge constitutional bench was really surprised at the large number of incidents which have happened. They were really surprised, saying that not many complaints were received by the West Bengal Human Rights Commission, not many were received by the police, but then moment it was opened up to the NHRC, thousands of complaints were being received. The NHRC's initial report, interim report, which was not made public because it contained a lot of sensitive information. Upon perusal of the interim report, the constitutional bench of the High Court had directed that the NHRC had granted NHRC some more time and had said that all people who've been denied their rations of medical facilities, they should be immediately granted by the state, irrespective of whether they possess a ration card or not. Immediately, all 164 statements of the victims should be taken, which are statements under the Code of Criminal Procedure for the victims made before a magistrate. So all of these statements should be taken. And one member of the National Human Rights Commission had constituted a 7-member committee, which comprised one member also from the National Commission for Minorities, its vice chairperson, Mr. Atif Rashid. National Commission for Women, Rajulben Desai. It was headed by Rajiv Jain, who was member NHRC. NHRC had one DIG level, one DG level officer, investigative cadre. There was one representative from the West Bengal Human Rights Commission, the registrar, and then of course you had one representative from the State Legal Services Authority, Mr. Raju Mukherjee. So this was the composition of the National Human Rights Commission, the committee which was set up by the NHRC. One member of the committee, Atif Rashid, vice chairperson of the National Commission for Minorities, was attacked in the Jadavpur area, which is just on the outskirts of Calcutta. The Deputy Commissioner of Police, Southwest Division, was called upon to file a report saying that was show cause as to why a court-appointed committee member could be attacked in such fashion despite having prior notice. The court also gave a very, very interesting direction. Court asked all call logs of all communication exchanged between the intelligence bodies and the rest to be kept in a sealed cover and should be signed by all members of the NHRC. Of all government machineries post 2nd of May, they should be kept and should be preserved. Call logs, communications, all of these. That was a very, very interesting direction. So then the National Human Rights Commission was granted some more time. The NHRC gave its final report, which ran into nearly 4,000 pages. After the final report came of the NHRC, the most interesting was in West Bengal, it's the law of the ruler which prevails, not the rule of law. It was a scathing indictment on the state of affairs in Bengal. It was told the way in which the witnesses were being threatened, the way in which the victims were being threatened to withdraw their complaints. Incidentally, just to go back a bit, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights had also issued several notices regarding violation of child rights upon police officials. And then coming back to the NHRC report, It was really a scathing indictment. It listed out the number of complaints which it had received from various quarters. Thousands of complaints were received. They were getting flooded with them. The NHRC said that it will take several months to examine all of those complaints. In a couple of months, the amount of torture which had happened, to study them will take several months. That's very interesting. And it came up with 28 recommendations, some of which were ameliorative in nature, some of which called for urgent intervention. And in this manner and fashion, a lot of incidents were highlighted. It was told they had taken down, jotted down, they had made field visits. There were 7 teams which were spread out all across Bengal. They went to almost every affected district. And those 7 teams came up with their reports, which were compiled together, which contained victim statements. There was a list containing the list of delinquent police officials, list of criminals and goons. So all of these, which form part of the NHRC charter or terms of reference, were placed before the court. The 28 recommendations also included CBI, SIT, other measures, confidence building measures, use of central security forces, use of police reforms in the state. So a lot of things together. So to cut a long matter short, we've had then on the 3rd of August, the state government also came up with this exception, 17-volume exception to this NHRC report. And then we've had arguments being advanced by both the sides. Upon conclusion of arguments, on the 3rd of August, the Constitutional Bench pronounced its judgment on the 19th of August. That judgment was a landmark one. Like several streams emanate from several directions, they reach the ocean. Similarly, all 5 judges gave their own opinions but reached the same conclusion. We'll quickly rush to the conclusion once. The conclusion was all heinous cases, including murders, rapes, and attempt to rape, would be handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation for the purpose of investigation. That would be a court-monitored investigation. Within 6 weeks, they have got to submit the report. And the CBI would be entitled to take assistance from all state government authorities. Then a special investigating team was also constituted, comprising 3 of IPS officers of the West Bengal cadre, Suman Wala Sahu, Ranveer Kumar, and then Somen Mitra. And they were to be monitored by a retired Supreme Court judge who's yet unnamed. And then it would again be a court monitored investigation. But then, of course, the state would have a lot of role to play in it. In this situation, so the SIT is not yet been notified, although the CBI is coming to the state and is making certain investigations. And then the state was directed to pay compensation to all the affected victims as per its policy. And of course, after making due verification, the affidavit of Rashid Munir Khan, the Rashid Munir Khan issue would be dealt with separately. And then, of course, all state government agencies and instrumentalities were directed to render assistance to the CBI and the SIT. And then the members of the SIT no adverse action can be taken against them without leave of the court. So in this fashion and in this manner, the Constitutional Bench of the High Court ruled. And then there were certain smaller directions given, including the central government also assisting them. Within 6 weeks, the matter is made returnable. So they can file applications at any point of time. So in this manner, in this fashion, the matter was proceeded with. The Constitutional Bench highlighted 3 instances where the case of Kush Khetrapal, the 2 other scheduled caste cases, where complaints or FIRs were lodged after over a month in all of these 3 instances. And these were all murder cases. In several murder cases, no FIRs were lodged. The court came up with a list of them. We have it in the judgment. Really, time would not permit us to discuss all of these issues. And the court said that there is a direct allegation against the state police, and the role of the state police is evident from the facts which have come up before the court, including the delayed registration of FIRs. In fact, the NHRC in its report said that around 3% of accused people named in the FIRs had been arrested. So 97% of perpetrators of crime are roaming out on the streets of Bengal, maybe to find out the next lady to be raped, the next man to be killed, the next child to be taken away from his parents. So in this manner, the role of the state police officials was strongly criticized by the government, by the court, and the role of the government also. And the court really went on to a study of how the state went on violating the rights of its citizens and failing in its duties of protecting their constitutional guarantees and freedoms. The other issues, of course, the court said, we will deal with them, as and when time comes. But these call for urgent action. And in fact, the time limit set by the court is really shows the intent of the court and the way in which the conscience of the court was shaken. So in this manner, we've had the Central Bureau of Investigation making 4 investigating units. Those 4 investigating units have started their investigation. They've reached out to the victims. And then, of course, we will see in the future, we really look forward to seeing such kind of situation nowhere in the future plays out in the streets of Bengal once again. Our mothers, our sisters, our fathers, our citizens are saved. And democracy does not bring with it any more blood. Democracy really respects the will of the people. Thank you so much for offering me this opportunity. I would have really wanted to discuss a lot, but then of course, time remains a constraint for all of us. Thank you, Professor Gupta, once again.
Thank you, Loknath, for your very elegant and articulate presentation. So, though we are a little short of time, but I would request anybody who has a question to type it into here so that we can take it. Some students have asked me a question, but many of them don't wish to be identified. So I'll just ask the gist of their question. The first question is Aman, who is asking me if there's any appeal pending from this order and what is likely to be the outcome of that appeal.
No appeal, no SLP is pending to our knowledge, but caveats have already been lodged. So that needs to be seen as to whether, but at least to our knowledge, no SLP has been filed yet. Not that we've received any information. So, and if you really look at the outcome, that I think, after all of these facts have come on record, perhaps it will be a bit difficult for any other view to come. But then, of course, we would have really wanted the investigation to be transferred to some other state, the way it was done in the case of the Gujarat SIT, and the trial being conducted outside, because witnesses are being scared. People have been forced to withdraw their complaints. So this is happening on a regular basis. Yes.
So it's a beginning of a long war, what I understand. I mean, this is just a step 1. So another question, I think this student is actually from Punjab, and this is why he's asking this. If it is common in West Bengal for the state to issue arms licenses, especially prohibited bore licenses to its supporters, if there are a lot of arms, legal arms in West Bengal.
No, West Bengal is a hub of illegal arms, is a hub of illegal weapons, but not in the sense, if you really ask for legal arms to be given, it will be a long procedure. But of course, it's a hub of illegal arms. You've got, at one point of time, arms would come in from Nepal through the Siliguri corridor, would come in from Bangladesh. In fact, certain bordering districts are also the hub of FICN, which is fake Indian currency notes, smuggling activities. In fact, one entire police station was burnt in Malda, Kaliachok police station, a few years back, on the rules of someone having offended some religious person. And, an entire police station was burnt along with all records of smuggling activities and all. But then, of course, if you remember the Kagragar bomb blast in Burdwan, if you look at other bomb blasts which have happened all across the state, it is evident that the um, really jihadi elements have set up camps here. And in fact, these are also being investigated by the NIA. In fact, if you really look at it, all of these people have pleaded guilty in those cases to have really planted those and brought in those bombs and have taken part in activities, jihadi activities across the border. So Bengal that way is sitting really on a boiling pot.
So I think I am just continuing with this question. So he's asking, will it be actually a good idea to issue arms licenses, because that was what was done in Punjab at the height of the Khalistan militancy?
Correct. But again, whether as a country we are responsible enough to have arms licenses for all, whether we are an emotional country, and more so Bengalis are an emotional breed, so it will lead to more people near and dear getting killed rather than it helping in fighting others. But I mean, perhaps linking it to the height of Khalistani movement in Punjab and Bengal in giving arms licenses, perhaps an eye for an eye, if we are to invoke Mahatma Gandhi. But then of course security is required on the ground, and then really you can't have you killing with a rifle a mob of 300 people. So that's again another thing. So what is essential is, of course, security is important. So we should have more police pickets. We should have more central government, central forces, patrolling the streets of Bengal. So this is more important. So instead of that,
So Kaushik is asking, how fruitful will the investigation turn out to be? Because CBI has failed many places, and the state has actively tried to obstruct CBI in the past. So
true, absolutely correct. The state has tried to obstruct the CBI, and in fact, the CBI is considered alien by the state government. But then, of course, this time the CBI investigation is being directly monitored by the court, and it bears the imprimatur of the court this time. So perhaps I think we will be in a better, the investigation will proceed in a better fashion and manner than earlier. But again, that is not to make any comment on any earlier investigation being conducted by the CBI, because the moment these cases get handed over to the CBI, most of the evidence gets destroyed. So a lot of other problems happen. So that is one reason where their CBI finds it difficult. But then these are clear-cut cases of murder. These are clear-cut cases of rape. So perhaps I think I really pray and hope that Bengal will be saved.
Okay, so Bala is asking me, the judgment day, the judicial process really takes a long time to come. So what is the expected outcome from a purely judicial point of view?
From a purely judicial point of view, it will depend on the investigation and what the report of the investigation is. So perhaps, with the report of the investigating agencies being submitted, that we will be able to obtain after 6 weeks, once the status report is filed before the court. So hopefully, I think the judicial, but then again, it's a lot of factors on which things depend, including the investigation, and then of course the trial before the subordinate court, the witnesses not getting managed. If you remember, in Gujarat, the witnesses are still enjoying police protection to this day. So whether this kind of protection, I mean, I really believe that this kind of protection should be granted and given in Bengal, but these protections should come on board before more witnesses are taken away, threatened, and enticed.
So there's another question. The student does not wish to be identified. His question is, why did the central forces leave? Because there was some intimation that this is the nature of Bengal, and now that the elections are being particularly, even before the election, this violence took place. There have been waves of violence in Bengal. So couldn't the forces have stayed a little longer?
Good, very good question. But central forces, their role and ambit was kept a bit limited. Central forces, what happened was, during election, you had the election commission requesting their support. That's why they would go on doing patrolling work a bit. But regular law and order was never the responsibility of the central forces. If you remember, even during the height of the elections, the cases would be registered, investigated, people would be arrested by the local police. So of course, the role of the central police, the central forces would not really have been able to, because if you really know, I mean, all of us are aware that law and order is a state responsibility. So to some extent, for the central government to poke their nose in there creates a bit of an issue without taking other constitutional steps. So that to that extent, of course, it would really not have helped even if the central forces were there, and the job of the central forces was entirely different for whatever purpose they were brought in to Bengal.
Okay, and there is a follow-up question by, I mean, he also does not wish to be identified. So why, I mean, the Article 356 has been used for much less things. I mean, why not use 356 or 357 to put
See, I'll tell
some
you,
kind, yeah.
Absolutely correct question. Articles 355, 356, 357, all of these are important, germane. But then, of course, there are two streams of thought even within the BJP. One stream of thought is that, see, we've been subjected to, the excesses of 356 a lot, many times. In fact, by the stroke of a pen, entire elected governments were, brought down to their knees by the Congress at various points of time. So therefore, this is one stream of thought which really, really opposes 356 under any circumstances. If you remember, BJP's almost never brought in an emergency, unless it's been really the government resigning or otherwise. So that's one stream of thought which exists from the emergency days, because they've been subjected to emergency excesses a lot much. The other reason is, 356 really calls for the entire constitutional machinery breakdown and all of it. So to that extent, it initially, for lack of information or whatever reason it may be, it could not be clearly established to what extent there was a failure of constitutional machinery in the state, because to a great extent we were really not able to understand how and in which manner there was really this failure on the part of information was not being made clear. And thereafter, there were matters filed before the Honorable Supreme Court of India, which was in season of whether 356 could be imposed in Bengal or not. So, a lot of factors went in together.
Then another question, once again, does not wish to be identified. He's asking me, or she is asking me, when did it become communalized? Did it become communalized at some point of time, or was it the trigger to begin with?
See, I'll tell you, one of the reasons as to why the matter was referred to a constitutional bench from a division bench was, one of the issues raised was that it was an attack upon Hindus by Muslims. So people were accusing that there were mobs large, so therefore this became a communal situation. So for that one reason, the matter was really referred from the division bench to the constitutional bench. So that is one way of looking at it. And then, of course, you've had many a times, in fact, including a lot of goons in the southern parts of the state attacking, in many parts of the state attacking. So it was a communal thing from the kinds of the attackers, from if you look at the people who were accused, people who've been attacked. So to that extent, it became a communal thing. But then, of course, people of the but then, of course, if you look at the larger picture, it's also an attack on democracy, on the opposition, on the opposing voice in a democracy. If you look at the people from the Indian Secular Front, ISF, which was a party floated by Abbas Siddiqui, who is a religious leader of the Muslims. So in fact, his people were also attacked. He has, there's just one legislator, and that MLF was not even getting a place to stay. Very interesting part of these elections is this 2021 West Bengal general elections. Very interesting trend which we see is the entire Congress and left have been wiped out. Not a single member has been elected to the Legislative Assembly from the Congress and the left. So these also show interesting trends in our democracy. Of course, that calls for a separate discussion. Yeah.
Okay. And so another of my colleagues is musing that the interesting aspect is there was no suo motu notice taken by the High Court. It shows that Bengali civil society, there is no in-between space in Bengal politics, and Delhi, even if the laboratory toilet is broken in the jail, the High Court takes suo motu notice, and here all this happened. No response from High Court.
Absolutely, a very nice question. In fact, suo motu cognizance could have been taken, but the problem is suo motu cognizance, the media has to report it. If you look at the mainstream media, there was a deafening silence in the mainstream media, and that is one point which I tried to highlight in my, the failure of the fourth estate in the democratic space in Bengal. So yeah, the media was not really doing it. It was, we were getting information, the others were getting information, but then suo motu cognizance to that extent was not taken. The courts were really slow in to that extent and in that bit. So although in the rest of the country suo motu cognizance has been taken on various, in fact even so-called smaller incidents, if we may call them, but here it was a large widespread thing. That is absolutely right question, pointed question. So it in fact even points out. So the other question which was raised was regarding the civil society. In fact, the the Bengali civil society and intelligence is concerned about Afghanistan, is concerned about, has interesting things to say about the Taliban, has interesting things to say about how Israel attacked Palestine, how Palestine is fighting back, of what's happening in Syria, but then really will not be caring about what's happening in their own backyard of this creeping problem, which can, overshadow them and take over the entire state at any point of time. So to that extent, if you really look at it, so we don't have a really neutral civil society and intelligentsia in Bengal. In fact, the civil society in the rest of the country was really concerned about the situation in Bengal. They had spoken out, they had come out with reports, they had dropped down to Bengal. But then Bengali civil society was surprisingly, but predictably, and sadly quiet.
Yes, I mean, Bengal, of course, the situation now is, I mean, those of whom you are not from Bengal perhaps don't know that even Durga Pujas in Bengal have now got politicized. So it's a party organized pujas. I mean, this was not the case even in the 34 years of the left, but this is what it is today. I think we have time for just one last question. I think PK is asking that can the Constitution bench ask for the West Bengal government to submit affidavit stating that no such incident took place at all? Can't they be made to give a categorical statement on the status? But I think the High Court they have already stated that some.
So no, they've really condemned the role of the state when the state said that really no such incidents have happened. So
Yeah.
that question has already been discussed by the High Court, and it's been argued by the constitutional bench. So to that extent, the state government has been caught on the wrong foot.
Okay.
Although they had flown in lawyers from Delhi and all, so even then.
No, another interesting aspect I see that West Bengal's lawyers, I mean, some of them people who are arguing for the state of West Bengal, they have fought the election against them, and their own supporters were probably targeted. So I do not understand this strange logic of the case, but it seems that this is just a beginning. I mean, we always knew that something is rotten in the state, but how rotten, perhaps?
No, but perhaps the entire country and of course the larger society has to be aware of the lack of civil liberties, and we'll have to stand for civil liberties in West Bengal, civil liberties, rights of the individual, and of course the larger right to life question. So we expect a lot of support from outside the state, because support within the state, people are scared, people are really afraid of opening up. So whenever they open up, they false cases are slapped on them, and they are really in one after the other, they are put into trouble. So therefore we are really looking at support from outside the state when the question of protecting civil liberties in Bengal is concerned.
Exactly. And Kaushik here is observing that the most common ground is the NDPS Act, because NDPS Act is very, I mean, you can plant it anytime and get away with it.
Random people are accused of NDPS cases. And the problem is NDPS cases, arms cases, women-related cases, cheating cases. So most of them are false in Bengal.
And not easy to get bail. I mean, easy to harass, difficult to prove the sort of cases.
And in fact, the amount of torture, in fact, there have been incidents, I've done cases on that, where police have tied ropes around people and have taken them around, parading them like, animals. So in fact, when handcuffing has been prohibited in this situation, they are doing that. The police are torturing people in their jails, in the cells, in human manner. They are using horrible, swear words. They are trying to target people, and it's a horrible scene, the way people are being tortured, even in jails.
I think the National Human Rights Commission have noted the situation in the custody. I mean, this of course predates the violence, but if you have a rotten keeper, you would always get a rotten product. I mean, this is actually coming to climax. The long-term entrenchment of civil society, the evisceration of in-between space, finally, rule of law itself is sort of unfolding.
Correct.
So thanks so much, Loknath, for your very eloquent presentation. I also extend my thanks to the IT team for making it happen. And thank you all the participants. So I hope to see more of you and hear more of you as the matter evolves. And see you later. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you so much.